I was born with these abilities. It was quite an issue for me growing up, and a lot of times people who have abilities like mine, you'll hear that they may have gotten in a car accident and been in a coma, at which point they come back and they all of a sudden are able to perceive things that most people can't perceive. I was not one of those. I came in with my abilities fully intact. Well, this always presents a problem because many people have said, and if you study philosophy, that we could be calling the same color purple, and to you it's a different color than it is to me. So in reality, I don't know how everybody else sees the world, but from what I've gathered in conversation, the difference is that I don't perceive there being anything that is static. To me, every single object, whether it's solid to somebody else or not, is moving. So everything in this universe to me looks more like a vibration, like energy vibrating. And I can interpret that vibration. And also, there is this line that we call skin. To me, this line is just a certain point of density. So a person starts, what I would say, an individual entity would start about 3 to 6 feet beyond this level that we call skin. I can also see past the skin into organs, into the bone structure. And people are much more colorful, I think, to me than what I've gathered from most people that I've talked to. I perceive auras, which are basically an electromagnetic field. They're the thought form part of a human being. So when I refer to source, this would be another word to use for God. It's not the kind of God that many people think of in terms of this being that is sitting there playing us like chess pieces. We are portions of source. So source essentially, in the quest to know itself, you can only know yourself if you're sitting in a space of true unity from a space of separateness. Physical structure is as separate as it gets. So if you are going to experience life here and gain any sort of awareness of what unity is, you must first be separate. So here we are in these physical bodies. Our physical bodies are made of this unified energy, which is source. So source could be called the immense ultimate. It is everything that is part of source. But this larger part of source, which is not practicing this point of view of separate physical structure, is still immersed in this complete unified space. So you could say that we in our physical bodies are an experience of source. And so source would be another word for God.
Great.
I refuse to affiliate with religion because I don't believe in separation. One of my most important core teachings is the teaching of oneness, which means basically that I don't believe in the separation that religion creates. So there's truth within every religion, but there is no one truth that can be expressed through any specific religion. That's a loaded question. So the meaning of life, somebody who sees the way that I would see, would say that the life serves the purpose of the universe at large evolving. We are in a process of consciousness becoming conscious of itself. It does that through our thoughts. So every time a person or a non-person, any living thing, comes down and experiences this life, we create the idea of the improved life. And then we become, or successive generations become that improvement. This is the reason for species evolution. So yes, if you look scientifically, evolution happens, but this is a physical thing that we're seeing that's a result of something much bigger. So I would say the purpose of life is this evolution towards what is ultimately oneness, but a unified oneness that is complete with consciousness. A unified consciousness which is conscious of itself. It's a very complicated subject to understand from a three-dimensional standpoint, like a human's brain is, but you can access this sort of truth through meditation or any of these type of things. However, what's very important to note is that the way that you find a way to evolve in this life without having to die in order to realize it is that you have this emotional system within you. This emotional system, if you're going to treat it like a compass, is telling you whether you are in line with what you are going to evolve towards or whether you aren't. So you either have to die to realize this evolved scenario, or you can experience it in your life. And the way you do that is by aligning with what I call your bliss. So a person, if they're going to live life in a state of happiness, is much closer to this purpose of life than somebody who is in a state where they're unhappy most of the time. So on one hand, you could say that the purpose of life is evolving. That's a bigger picture. On the second hand, you could say that the purpose of life is happiness. This is going to be a long explanation, is that right? Okay, how do I explain the ghost? So, if anybody's familiar with my articles and books, I refer to thought forms as a tulpa. It's an old word that was used in Tibet. What a thought form is basically a thought that has been thought long enough that its vibration, instead of behaving in wave function, is starting to behave more like a particle in its properties. So even though it does not have what we might call, to some people it doesn't have a sight and a sound and a texture, it still has more of them than just the thought that you would think of as an abstraction. Thoughts are not abstractions, but it's a more manifested version of thought. And these thought forms can at times meddle with electricity. They can sometimes manipulate physical objects. They can manifest in many ways, and they're incredibly dependent on people who are focusing on them. So if somebody who is able to see them comes into a room like me, the chances are you're going to get a lot more poltergeistic activity, what people would say is poltergeistic activity, because they can actually utilize the energy off of other things within this universe in order to manifest themselves. When you die, you are source energy. So your energy, which you are completely focused into this physical body with, will pull back out of this physical body. It stays behind. Will pull back out of this tulpa, which a thought form is essentially the idea of you. So this identity that you have in this life, any issues you may have from this life, is part of this idea of you, which I call a tulpa. So you will pull back from that, and you're now part of this unified consciousness source, what most people call God. However, this thought, because every thought that's ever been thought exists, is still vibrating. And if it's got a lot of energy, which it does it often does when there's a situation where a person dies and they have a lot of emotional energy going on still, like a murder, this energy can sort of surge into form. So people may perceive them moving things. People may perceive them trying to get messages across, things like this. What most people don't understand is that there are two types of tulpas. There are the exiting tulpas, which is what a ghost is. That means that it's not connected, essentially, to this bigger part of source. It's just this idea that's still operating and still manifesting itself with those previous issues that it had before it died. Which is why there's this whole thing about ghosts having unfinished business. It's that your identity, which you have left behind in death, still is participating in its prerogative. it can be talked out of this. I mean, you can focus it out of it. People who are living can focus these thought forms out of form into the light, like you would say. But there's also an entering toolpath. So when people are on their deathbed, quite often they will suddenly be able to speak to people that they knew during their past. A lot of people around these individuals will say, oh, well, they're hallucinating. When what it actually is that in their coming so close to death, they are able to now have this more objective view, and so they're able to see thought forms. And so this energy that is part of Source can come back into one of these thought forms. You can reconnect with anyone. I mean, potentially if you die, you can reconnect with a thought form that happened centuries and centuries ago. But let's say that I had an incredibly good friend and I had died, this life was over, I'm now part of Source. I have more objective view than I ever had before. I can reactivate this vibration of this thought that that person knew, the me that they knew in this life. And if they're going through a difficult situation, it may be of benefit for them to see me in that light again, because that's the one that is familiar to them and the one that comforts them. So I may choose to go back into that. And this is when you would call this type of ghost is an entering toolpath, not an exiting toolpath, which means it has a direct connection to Source. This is also what people say, as call angels. This is what an angel is. It is that thought. This Source has projected itself into a thought that is not quite a physical structure yet, but it's still serving a purpose here on this earth, which is different than a ghost, of course, which is this exiting toolpath, which is just a thought form of you, the idea of you in this life, which is continually sort of stuck in this pattern of vibration still.